Hey there! Welcome to this lesson where I'm going to talk about strategic domain-driven design. In this lesson, I'm going to share the specifics of what this really means. What is it to be strategic in your domain-driven design? Essentially, it's a set of principles you will be following when you're modeling your environment to maintain your model integrity, to distill the right formats and such, and essentially recommending to have several models instead of one. This groups itself in a couple of concepts we've already been talking about. We're not just having a single massive domain. This domain internally carries a couple of subdomains which work with one another. It's the idea of using these bounded contexts to separate yourself from the rest, which will help in this process as well. And lastly, we'll be looking a little bit at what context mapping allows us to do from a strategic perspective. So let's reiterate the bounded context we have shared in earlier courses. When it comes to using the bounded context, you will be first constructing your model, adding all the components you require in it. It's in this process that you define your boundaries very strictly. The boundaries are things like your team organization, the usage of your model, or the physical manifestation of where your data is stored, or where your code is being stored in what type of repository. In the step thereafter, you're being certain that you keep your model strictly consistent within these bounds. Everything internally within your boundaries means this is what we talk about, this is our ubiquitous language, and we are very strict in maintaining it that way. Whenever we're dealing with something from the outside, we don't want to be distracted about what they think. We separate those concerns. They talk a different language, and we translate over what their ideas and solutions are to our internal ideas and solutions. It's that translation step which brings us to the idea of context mapping to allow us this strategic domain-driven design. When you're context mapping, you will name each context you have very definitely. It's after naming of these that you describe the relationships between these contexts, between these subdomains, so you will. In the process of describing these relationships, you define the points of contact you have between all these contexts. You outline the explicit translations, the context mapping you are doing between these points of contact, and you highlight the concepts you do share between those. So specifically, being strict about what you share with others and what you do not share with others. It's the idea of the relationships between those concepts, which brings the idea of using transactions. What's important to know when we're talking about these transactions is that not all of them are atomic. That simply isn't an option. Think about business transactions that often have a concept of time in place as well, or that they interact with several of these subdomains we've been talking about, or these contexts. Examples of these are money transfers, or the idea of finance, booking, and flight operations working in conjunction with one another. So let's have a look at this last example, the booking, finance, and flight ops. They essentially belong to one big domain where you're dealing with flight specifics, but there are subdomains in this, essentially different contexts, so you will, which do a form of context mapping. When you have such a cross-context transaction where booking knows some specifics when a flight is being booked, finance needs to be aware of this to know that the funds need to come in, and flight operations needs to know how to, set the seats for this new booking once the finances are in. This means you have a form of a transaction between these components going on, describing the need to know each other's language. The booking context needs to be aware of what finance talks. Similarly, flight ops needs to know what booking and finance are doing. It's, a cross-context transaction, and we have a certain form of mapping in place to talk with one another. We can take this format where each context knows how to talk with each other context. We could also go for a different approach. In a different approach, you would be dealing with having a component in the middle, dealing with the process of talking with booking, finance, and flight ops, doing this specific for you. It's this component in the middle which you would be referring to as a process manager. What a process manager does in such a solution is coordinate the activities between different aggregates or bounded contexts. From the aggregate perspective, that's specific instances of those aggregates which are interplaying with a specific form of cross-context transaction. What these process managers do is react to events occurring from these different models. They initiate actions when they receive such an event, for example, dispatching a command, and they maintain state during the process of this transaction because they require that state to make the right decisions, to correctly deal with the process at hand. So a process manager is a very nice tool, but we not always need to use a process manager. There are some scenarios where you do or do not use such a component. Just by having a look back at our initial cross-cutting transaction, where we're using booking, finance, and flight ops, which each know about each other's language and just follow the steps intermittently with one another. This is essentially the choreography pattern you would be using. Nothing inherently wrong with this, just one of your tools in your tool belt. What we've been sharing with the process manager, having a component in the middle, doing the communication between these models and or contexts, that's essentially orchestration. The process manager is orchestrating the steps from booking to finance, from finance to flight ops, and vice versa. Both are a good tool and both will work and help when you're constructing your complex business processes. That's really it for this lesson. Let's move along to the following step in the process.